Little girl humiliated by manager at luxury store, unaware the girl was a fashion genius. Welcome back and enjoy the story. The cold wind pierced through Mia's worn-out coat as she stood alone in front of the luxury boutique, her fingers stiff with cold inside tattered gloves. She was just 10 years old, but her eyes held a storm that no child should carry. In her small hand, she clutched a pouch of coins she'd collected over months, cleaning stairwells, returning bottles, doing favors for elderly neighbors. All for one purpose: buying a birthday gift for her sick mother, who hadn't smiled in weeks. As she stepped into the warm, glittering world of Bellamy and Chase, everything about her felt out of place. Her patched boots soaked from the snow, her hair tangled, her cheeks red from the cold. The other customers glanced at her with distaste. Then the store manager, a tall woman dressed in sleek black, approached. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" she asked, her tone sharp and mocking. "No. I want to buy a present for my mom," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle classical music playing throughout the store. The manager, Ms. Valerie Harlow, raised an eyebrow and laughed, loud enough for the nearby customers to hear. "With what? Bottle caps?" Mia slowly opened her pouch, revealing the coins she had earned with so much effort. "I saved for 3 months." Her fingers trembled slightly as she displayed her humble treasure, each coin representing hours of labor, hope, and determination. Valerie sneered, her perfectly painted red lips curling with disdain. "The cheapest thing here costs more than everything in that filthy little bag. Try the second-hand store down the street." Those words burned more than the cold. Mia turned to leave, fighting back tears, when a calm, firm voice interrupted. "How much do you have, young lady?" She turned and saw a man in a long dark coat with silver in his hair and kindness in his eyes. His posture suggested authority, but his gaze held nothing but compassion. $37.20, she replied softly, her voice gaining strength as she counted her savings with pride despite her embarrassment. "That's more than enough to buy something truly special," he said. Then turning to the manager, "Show us your finest jewelry." "But, Mr. Nash—" "You heard me," he interrupted gently, but with unmistakable authority. What followed felt like a dream. Mr. Oscar Nash, who she later learned was the owner of the store, picked out a sapphire necklace encased in white gold and insisted she pay with her coins. Valerie counted them, her face pale with shame. When they left the store, Mia looked up at the man. "Why did you help me?" He paused, then said, "Because once I was a child like you and no one helped me." At home, her mother, Claire, pale and weakened from illness, held the necklace as if it were made of light. "But how?" she whispered, her thin fingers tracing the delicate setting. Mia smiled. "I earned it." But the truth burned in her chest, not because she lied, but because she wished she hadn't needed help. Later that week, desperate for food and medicine, Mia found the courage to call the number on Mr. Nash's business card. He came to their crumbling attic apartment himself, bringing groceries, a doctor, and something rarer: dignity. "I want to help you get well," he said to Claire, "and I want your daughter to have a future." They moved into a small but warm apartment. Claire began treatment. Mia started at a new school. Still, none of it erased the humiliation of that day. It stayed with her like a fire under the skin. She never told anyone that she had designed every piece of jewelry in that store, not just with paper and pencil, but with talent that had caught the attention of private buyers online. She had been anonymous until that day. Valerie was demoted, and one afternoon she was called into a meeting with the new creative director, the 10-year-old girl she had once humiliated. Mia looked her in the eye and said, "My mother taught me that kindness matters more than wealth, but respect, that must be earned. I hope today you start earning it." Valerie lowered her head in silence. No one knew Mia's name before that day. Now the fashion world did, but she didn't care about fame. She only cared that her mother smiled again, that warmth returned to their home, and that no other child would ever be made to feel small in a place built on vanity, because she hadn't just come to buy a necklace, she came to change the story. The air in Chicago's prestigious North Michigan Avenue felt brittle with cold as Mia Peterson clutched her mother's hand. Claire's fingers were thin and frail against her own, a reminder of the illness that had hollowed her once vibrant spirit. Mia was 10, but her eyes carried the weight of someone much older as she guided her mother through the biting December wind toward the warmth of their tiny apartment. "Let's get you inside, Mom," she murmured, her voice gentle but firm beyond her years. The stairs to their third-floor walk-up seemed steeper each day, and Claire's breathing grew more labored with each step. When they finally reached their door, Mia helped her mother to the worn sofa that doubled as Claire's bed on the worst days. Today was one of those days. "Just rest," Mia said, tucking a threadbare blanket around her mother's shoulders. "I'll make some tea." While the kettle heated on their temperamental stove, Mia pulled out her most precious possession from beneath her mattress, a sketchbook filled with designs that transformed ordinary objects into extraordinary pieces of art. Her fingers, small but sure, moved across the page, adding intricate details to a pendant design that had come to her in a dream. The pendant curved like a wave, cradles of silver holding stones in a pattern that reminded her of stars falling into the sea. Claire's cough broke her concentration. Mia quickly tucked the sketchbook away and brought the tea to her mother, whose eyes, though tired, sparkled with pride at the sight of her daughter. "What were you drawing, my little artist?" Claire asked, her voice raspy. "Just doodles," Mia replied with a shy smile, handing her mother the steaming mug. "Nothing important." But they both knew it was more than doodles. Even at 10, Mia's talent was undeniable. Her teachers had noticed, neighbors had commented. Even strangers sometimes stopped to admire the intricate patterns she would absent-mindedly draw on scraps of paper while waiting at bus stops. What no one knew was that Mia had found a way to transform these doodles into real income. For months, she had been scanning her designs at the public library and selling them through an online marketplace under the username Little Light Designs. The anonymity protected her age, while allowing her talent to speak for itself. The modest earnings weren't enough to change their circumstances dramatically, but they helped put food on the table when Claire's medical bills consumed most of her disability checks. Later that night, after Claire had fallen asleep, Mia counted the coins in her secret pouch. $37.20. Not enough for the medicine her mother needed, but maybe enough for something that might make her smile on her upcoming birthday. Something beautiful to remind Claire that life still held wonder, despite everything they'd lost. Tomorrow, Mia decided, she would visit Bellamy and Chase, the famous jewelry store whose window displays she'd admired from afar. She had seen a small silver bookmark there that reminded her of the days when Claire had been strong enough to read for hours, before the illness, before her father left, before everything changed. As she closed her eyes that night, Mia imagined her mother's face lighting up at the gift. She would make it happen, she had to. Because lately, her mother's smile had become as rare as the precious gems that glittered in those untouchable store windows. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing, the morning dawned grey and heavy with impending snow. As Mia prepared for her mission, she carefully placed her coin pouch in her coat pocket and told her sleeping mother she was going to the corner store. It wasn't entirely a lie. She would stop there on her way back for bread and soup. The detour to Michigan Avenue's luxury shopping district was the secret part of her journey. The city transformed as Mia walked north, buildings growing taller, windows more elaborate, pedestrians more elegantly dressed. By the time she reached the Golden Mile, she felt like an alien visitor to a strange planet. Women in fur coats breezed past without seeing her. Men in expensive suits strode purposefully, their leather shoes gleaming despite the slush. And there, between a French perfumery and an Italian fashion house, stood Bellamy and Chase, its window displays glowing like treasures in a museum. Mia hesitated at the entrance, her reflection in the polished glass a stark reminder of her outsider status. Her coat, once her mother's, hung past her knees. Her boots, found at a church donation center, were patched but clean. She had brushed her hair carefully, and washed her face with the lavender soap her mother saved for special occasions. Still, there was no disguising the poverty that clung to her like a shadow. With a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy door and stepped into another world. The difference between outside and inside hit her like a physical force, warmth enveloping her chilled bones, the scent of leather and expensive perfume replacing the city's harsh winter smell. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers, while crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across display cases of breathtaking jewelry. For a moment, Mia stood transfixed, forgetting why she had come. Then she saw it. The silver bookmark she'd glimpsed through the window weeks ago. It was smaller than she remembered, but still beautiful, with delicate engravings of leaves along its length. Her heart pounded as she approached the display, unconsciously pulling out her coin pouch to reassure herself her treasure was still there. "Can I help you?" The voice cut through Mia's thoughts like ice. She looked up to find a tall woman staring down at her, elegantly dressed in a tailored black suit, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Her name tag read, "Valerie Harlow, Manager." I'd like to see that bookmark, please," Mia said, pointing to the silver piece. Valerie's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose in skepticism. "That's sterling silver, hand-engraved by an artisan. In Florence, it's $85. Mia's heart sank, but she tried not to let it show. "Do you have anything smaller?" "I have $37.20. She held up her pouch, the coins jingling sadly inside. A sharp laugh escaped Valerie's painted lips, drawing the attention of nearby customers. "Are you lost?" "Sweetheart, this isn't a souvenir shop." Her voice carried through the quiet store, making several patrons turn to stare. Heat crawled up Mia's neck. "No, I want to buy a present for my mom," she whispered, her voice shrinking with each word. "With what? Bottle caps?" Valerie's tone was sharp enough to cut glass. Slowly, Mia opened her pouch, revealing the coins she had earned with so much effort. "I saved for 3 months. Each penny represented a moment of work, sweeping Ms. Abernathy's stairwell, returning bottles from the park, helping Mr. Franklin sort his recycling. Hours of labor transformed into metal discs that suddenly seemed worthless under Valerie's contemptuous gaze. "The cheapest thing here costs more than everything in that filthy little bag," Valerie said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Try the second-hand store down the street." The words hit Mia like physical blows. She turned to leave, her vision blurring with unshed tears, when a deep voice interrupted. "How much did you say you have, young lady?" Mia turned to see a distinguished-looking man, with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes, wearing an expensive wool coat and carrying a leather portfolio. Despite his obvious wealth, there was nothing intimidating about him, just a gentle curiosity that made Mia answer honestly. $37.20, sir," he smiled, transforming his serious face into something warm and approachable. "That sounds like more than enough for something truly special." Then, turning to Valerie, his tone shifted subtly. "Show us your finest jewelry, please." Valerie's expression flickered between confusion and alarm. "But Mr. Nash—" "You heard me," he said quietly, with the easy authority of someone used to being obeyed. Mia watched in astonishment as Valerie's demeanor changed instantly. She straightened her already perfect posture and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Mr. Nash, right this way." As they followed Valerie to a display case of glittering necklaces, the man leaned down slightly to address Mia. "I'm Oscar Nash. I own this establishment among others, and you are?" "Mia Peterson, sir," she added almost apologetically. "I just wanted to get my mom something nice for her birthday. She's been sick." Something flickered in Oscar's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. "A noble purpose," he said softly. Then, louder, "Ms. Harlow, please show Ms. Peterson the sapphire pendant from the Celestial Collection." Valerie hesitated, only a moment before removing a stunning necklace from the case, a delicate silver chain supporting a teardrop sapphire, surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught the light like stars. Mia gasped. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, and eerily similar to a design in her own sketchbook. The similarity wasn't lost on Oscar, whose observant eyes had caught sight of the edge of a paper peeking from Mia's coat. Pocket. This piece, he said, was inspired by the night sky over Lake Michigan. The designer said the arrangement of the stones represents the Pleiades constellation, the Seven Sisters. He looked at Mia with unexpected intensity. Do you like it? It's perfect, Mia whispered, momentarily forgetting that such an object could never be hers. My mom loves the stars. She used to take me to the planetarium before she got sick. Oscar nodded, as if this confirmed something for him. We'll take it. Valerie's professional mask slipped. Sir, this piece is priced at $3,750. I'm aware of the pricing in my own store, Ms. Harlow, he replied evenly. Ms. Peterson will pay what she has, and I will consider it an investment in a promising future. Mia stood frozen in disbelief as Valerie reluctantly processed the transaction, counting out Mia's coins with barely concealed distaste. When she finished, Oscar placed the necklace, now nestled in a midnight blue velvet box, into Mia's hands. Thank you, Mia managed, her voice thick with emotion. But why would you do this for me? Oscar studied her for a long moment before answering. Let's just say I recognize something in you that reminds me of myself at your age. Talent shouldn't be limited by circumstance. As they left the store together, snowflakes beginning to drift lazily from the darkening sky, Mia looked up at her unexpected benefactor. I don't understand. Oscar smiled, a hint of sadness creasing the corners of his eyes. You will. He handed her a business card. If you or your mother need anything at all, call that number, day or night. Before Mia could respond, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb, and Oscar Nash disappeared into its warm interior with a final nod of farewell, leaving Mia standing in the gently falling snow, holding a treasure she could never have imagined possessing. The bus ride home was a blur of emotion and disbelief. Mia kept her hand in her pocket, fingers wrapped around the velvet box as if it might disappear if she let go. By the time she reached their apartment building, the snow was falling steadily, transforming the grimy streets into something almost magical, a fitting backdrop for the miracle that had just occurred in her life. Upstairs, she found her mother awake and worried. Mia, where have you been? I was about to call Mrs. Rosenberg to look for you. Seeing her mother's distress, Mia felt a pang of guilt. I'm sorry, Mom. I had to get something important. She pulled out the velvet box and placed it in her mother's hands. Happy early birthday. Claire's confusion gave way to astonishment as she opened the box. The sapphire caught the weak afternoon, light streaming through their window, sending blue reflections dancing across the walls of their humble apartment. Mia, Claire whispered, how did you... I saved up, Mia said simply, the partial truth easier than explaining the full story. Do you like it? Claire looked from the necklace to her daughter's face, tears welling in her eyes. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But, sweetheart, we can't afford... We can, Mia interrupted firmly. I earned it for you. As she clasped the necklace around her mother's thin neck, Mia made a silent promise to herself. Somehow, she would repay Mr. Nash's kindness. Somehow, she would prove herself worthy of his belief in her, and somehow, she would ensure that her mother never had to worry about money again. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Chicago in a blanket of white that promised, if only briefly, that tomorrow could be a clean slate, a new beginning. As the kettle whistled from their tiny kitchen, signaling the return to their normal routine, Mia knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be quite the same again. A door had opened, offering a glimpse of possibilities she had only dreamed about, and she intended to walk through it with her head held high. Wait till you find out what happens next, as Mia's world begins to transform in ways she never imagined possible. The days following Mr. Nash's unexpected generosity passed in a strange haze for Mia. By day, she attended school, did her chores, and tended to her mother, whose health seemed to have improved slightly, perhaps from the joy the sapphire necklace had brought her. By night, Mia sketched feverishly, her pencil flying across the paper as if possessed. New designs poured from her mind faster than she could capture them, inspired by her brief glimpse into the world of luxury and beauty that existed just miles from her doorstep. A week after the encounter at Bellamy and Chase, Claire's condition worsened dramatically. It began with a fever that refused to break despite the generic medicine they could afford. By the second day, Claire could barely stand, and Mia found herself paralyzed with fear as her mother's breathing grew shallow and labored. "It's just a bad spell," Claire insisted between coughs that racked her thin frame. "I'll be fine by morning." But morning came and Claire couldn't rise from her bed. Her skin burned with fever, yet she shivered beneath the pile of blankets Mia had gathered. The medicine was gone, and their cupboards held little more than half a loaf of bread, and some nearly expired peanut butter. Mia sat beside her mother, dabbing her forehead with a cool cloth, terror clawing at her chest. She had no one to call. No neighbors close enough to help. The social worker who sometimes checked on them wouldn't be due for another week. Then, her eyes fell on her coat, hanging by the door, and she remembered the card Mr. Nash had given her. "If you or your mother need anything at all, call that number, day or night." Pride warred with desperation as Mia stared at the embossed card. Claire had always taught her to stand on her own feet, to never ask for handouts, to maintain dignity even when the world seemed determined to strip it away. But what good was pride if her mother died? With trembling fingers, Mia dialed the number on the payphone in the hallway. A woman answered, her voice crisp and professional. "Mr. Nash's office." I need to speak with Mr. Nash, please," Mia said, her voice small against the static of the line. "It's Mia Peterson. He gave me his card last week at Bellamy and Chase." There was a pause, and Mia's heart sank. Of course this wouldn't work. Why? Would someone like Oscar Nash remember someone like her? "One moment, please," the woman finally said, and the line fell silent. Mia counted her heartbeats, 27 of them, before Oscar Nash's distinctive voice came through the receiver. "Mia, I've been wondering if you would call." There was no surprise in his tone, only warmth. "What can I do for you?" The simple kindness in his voice broke something in Mia, and to her horror, she began to cry, silent, shuddering sobs that made it impossible to speak for several long moments. "Mia," concern had replaced the warmth. "Are you safe?" She managed to gather herself enough to choke out, "It's my mom. She's really sick. I don't know what to do. We don't have insurance for a real doctor, and the clinic has a 3-day wait." "And give me your address," he interrupted gently. "I'll be there as soon as possible." 40 minutes later, a knock at their apartment door revealed not only Oscar Nash, but also a distinguished-looking woman who introduced herself as Dr. Eleanor Reed. While Dr. Reed examined Claire, Oscar took Mia into the hallway. "Why didn't you call sooner?" he asked. No accusation in his voice, only genuine curiosity. Mia stared at her worn sneakers. "My mum says we shouldn't take charity, that we need to solve our own problems." Oscar knelt to her level, his expensive suit creasing as he balanced on one knee. "Mia, look at me." When she raised her eyes, he continued, "There's a difference between charity and investment. Do you know what an investment is?" She nodded cautiously. "It's when you put money into something because you think it will be worth more later." A smile touched his lips. "Exactly. I'm not offering charity. I'm investing in you, and, by extension, in your mother, because I believe your future is worth more than anything I could possibly contribute now." Before Mia could process this, Dr. Reed emerged from the apartment, her expression grave. "She needs hospitalization, Oscar. Pneumonia, severe malnutrition, and I suspect an underlying condition that requires more testing than I can do here." Oscar nodded, already pulling out his phone. "Make the arrangements. Use my name at Chicago Memorial." "Wait," Mia interjected, panic rising in her throat. "We can't afford a hospital, and she doesn't have insurance. I've taken care of." "Too," Oscar said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Your mother will receive the best care available, and you—" He paused, considering something. "How you'll stay with me until she recovers." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. An ambulance arrived with surprising speed. Claire was gently loaded onto a stretcher, an oxygen mask already helping her labored breathing. Mia was allowed to gather some clothes and her sketchbook before being ushered into Oscar's waiting car. As they pulled away from the dilapidated apartment building, Mia pressed her face against the window, watching as the only home she had known receded into the distance. Fear, gratitude, and a strange sense of destiny swirled within her. She had no idea what awaited her, but one thing was certain. Life as she had known it was over. Oscar's home turned out to be a penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the vastness of the water and sky. Mia was shown to a guest room larger than their entire apartment, with a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud, and a bathroom with more taps and buttons than she knew what to do with. That night, after being assured that her mother was stable and receiving treatment, Mia sat cross-legged on the impossibly soft carpet, her sketchbook open before her. The events of the day had unlocked something new in her artistic vision. Her pencil moved with purpose, creating not jewelry this time but clothing, dresses, coats and suits that flowed from her imagination with a clarity she had never experienced before. She was so absorbed that she didn't hear Oscar approach until he spoke from the doorway. "You have a remarkable gift," he said, nodding toward her drawings. Mia instinctively moved to cover her work, but stopped herself. "Thank you," she said instead, allowing him to see the pages. Oscar studied the sketches with the careful attention of someone who understood their value. "These aren't just fashion drawings," he observed. "They're architecture, structure, mathematics expressed in fabric and form." Mia had never thought of her designs that way, but as soon as he said it, she knew he was right. Her mind didn't just see beauty, it saw patterns, proportions, the geometry underlying aesthetic appeal. "I'd like to show these to someone," Oscar said, a strange intensity in his voice. "A friend who might be able to help develop your talent." "They're just doodles," Mia protested weakly, echoing what she had always told her mother. Oscar shook his head firmly. "No, Mia, they are much more than that. They're the beginning of something important." He paused, then added, "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll visit your mother, and then, if you're willing, I'd like to introduce you to some people who could change your life." As Mia settled into the unfamiliar luxury of her temporary bed, she couldn't help but wonder what Oscar saw in her that she couldn't see herself, and more importantly, what price would eventually come due for his extraordinary kindness. Because one thing Claire Peterson had always taught her daughter was that nothing in this world came without a cost. The question was whether Mia would be able to pay it when the time came. Have you ever encountered someone who recognized your potential before you fully saw it yourself? What did that moment of recognition feel like? Let me know in the comments. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows woke Mia from the deepest sleep she'd had in months. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The soft bed, the hushed silence, and the absence of her mother's gentle breathing all felt wrong. Then reality crashed back. Her mother in the hospital, Oscar Nash's unexpected intervention, and the strange new world she now inhabited. Mia slipped from beneath the plush comforter and padded to the window. Chicago sprawled beneath her, a vast grid of buildings and streets shrouded in early morning mist. From this height, the city looked like one of her designs, orderly, patterned, each element placed with purpose. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, overwhelmed by the gulf between the life she had known and whatever this new reality might become. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper Oscar had introduced last night, entered with a tray. "Good morning, Miss Peterson. Mr. Nash thought you might prefer breakfast in your room today." She set down a tray laden with food, more than Mia would typically eat in an entire day. "He asked me to tell you that he's arranged a hospital visit at 10, and then you have an appointment at Bellamy and Chase at noon." Mia's stomach tightened at the mention of the jewelry store. "Why are we going there?" Mrs. Chen smiled kindly. "I believe Mr. Nash wishes to introduce you to someone. He said to wear whatever makes you comfortable, but—" She gestured toward the closet. "He took the liberty of providing some options." After Mrs. Chen left, Mia discovered the options were actually an entire wardrobe of high-quality clothing in exactly her size. Jeans, sweaters, dresses, and even a winter coat that looked similar to the one she had always admired in a department store window. Each item still bore tags from exclusive boutiques, the prices making her lightheaded. She chose the simplest outfit: dark jeans, a green sweater soft as a whisper, and new sneakers that didn't pinch her toes. The reflection that greeted her in the bathroom mirror looked both familiar and strange. Still Mia, but somehow more polished, as if someone had adjusted the focus on a camera. At the hospital, Mia found her mother awake and dramatically improved. Color had returned to Claire's cheeks, and the desperate rattle in her breathing had subsided to an occasional cough. "Mom!" Mia rushed to the bedside, carefully embracing her mother's frail form. Claire stroked her daughter's hair. "There's my girl. They told me you're staying with Mr. Nash." Her voice carried a note of concern beneath the gratitude. "Just until you're better," Mia assured her. "He's been really nice, Mom. And look, he even got me new clothes." She twirled to display her outfit. Claire's expression softened. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." Then, as Oscar entered the room, she straightened slightly, dignity asserting itself despite her weakness. "Mr. Nash, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for us." Oscar approached the bed, his manner respectful rather than condescending. "Mrs. Peterson, the pleasure has been mine. Your daughter is an extraordinary young woman." They spoke for a while, Oscar explaining that Claire would remain hospitalized until the doctors were satisfied with her recovery, and then transition to a rehabilitation facility where she could regain her strength. The medical bills, he assured her, had been taken care of, a phrase that made Claire's lips tighten, but which she didn't challenge. As they prepared to leave, Claire beckoned Mia close and whispered, "Be careful, sweetheart. People don't usually give without expecting something in return." Mia nodded, her mother's warning echoing her own unspoken concerns. Yet something in Oscar's demeanor, a sadness behind his kindness perhaps, made her believe his motives weren't simply transactional. The car that delivered them to Bellamy and Chase was the same sleek vehicle that had whisked Mia away from her old life the day before. As they pulled up to the luxury storefront, Mia's anxiety spiked at the thought of encountering Valerie Harlow again. "Don't worry," Oscar said, seeming to read her thoughts. "Ms. Harlow won't be bothering you today, or any day, for that matter." Inside, the store appeared transformed. Where before it had seemed forbidding and exclusive, now Mia saw it through new eyes, as a showcase for artistry, craftsmanship, and imagination. Oscar led her past the main showroom to a door marked Private, which opened to reveal a workshop, where 3 people bent over benches, their hands moving with practiced precision over pieces of metal and stone. At their entrance, a woman in her 60s looked up, her silver hair cropped close to her head. Black-framed glasses perched on a nose that had clearly been broken at least once. She set down her tools and approached them, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oscar, this must be the prodigy you mentioned." Her voice was gravelly but warm, her German accent still pronounced despite what must have been decades in America. "Mia Peterson, meet Helga Brandt, the finest jewelry designer in the Midwest and my oldest friend." Helga snorted at the compliment, but extended her hand to Mia. "So, you are the girl who understands patterns, yes?" Mia shook the offered hand, confused. "Patterns?" Helga's shrewd eyes studied her. "Oscar showed me your sketches. Not the jewelry ones, the others, the ones you hide." She nodded toward the pocket where Mia habitually kept her folded designs. Only someone who sees the underlying mathematics of beauty could create such things. Before Mia could process this statement, Helga turned to Oscar. "You were right. She has the gift." Then to Mia again, "Come, show me what you see." What followed was unlike anything Mia had experienced. Helga placed various objects before her, a shell, a leaf, a crystal, and asked Mia to describe the patterns she observed. As Mia spoke, explaining the spirals, fractals, and geometric progressions that seemed so obvious to her, Helga nodded with increasing enthusiasm. "You see," she said to Oscar, "natural insight, untrained, but pure." To Mia she added, "This is rare, child, very rare." Oscar leaned against a workbench, watching the interaction with evident satisfaction. "I told you." Helga ignored him, her focus entirely on Mia now. "How would you like to learn? Not just to draw, but to create, to make real the things you see in your mind?" The offer hung in the air between them, momentous and terrifying in its implications. Mia thought of her mother, of their tiny apartment, of the life they had scraped together from necessity rather than choice. Then she thought of the designs that flowed from her fingers as naturally as breathing, seeking expression in a world that had never offered her the opportunity to give them form. "I would like that very much," Mia said finally, her voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Helga clapped her hands once decisively. "Good. We begin now. Today you watch, tomorrow you try. We see how quickly you learn." As Helga guided her through the workshop, Mia felt as though she had stepped into a different universe. Each craftsperson had their own station, equipped with tools she'd never seen before. Delicate pliers in a dozen sizes, tiny hammers, torches that produced flames so precise they could heat a single point without affecting the metal around. "This is Franz," Helga said, introducing a middle-aged man with spectacles and meticulous hands who was setting tiny diamonds into a platinum band. "Best stone setter in Chicago. Maybe America." Franz looked up briefly, nodded at Mia with a small smile and returned to his work. "And this is Layla," Helga continued, gesturing to a young woman painstakingly engraving a pattern onto a gold bracelet. "She came to me 5 years ago, knowing nothing. Now her hands speak the language of metal." Layla grinned at Mia. "Don't let Helga scare you. She's tough but fair." "I am not tough," Helga protested. "I am German, is different." The afternoon passed in a blur of demonstrations and explanations. Mia watched enthralled as Helga transformed a flat sheet of silver into a 3-dimensional form that echoed the spiral pattern of the shell they had examined earlier. Each tap of the hammer, each twist of the metal seemed guided by an invisible force that Mia somehow recognized, as if the pattern itself dictated how it wanted to be expressed. By the time they left, darkness had fallen over Chicago, the store windows casting golden rectangles onto the snowy sidewalk. Oscar had been mostly silent during the workshop visit, allowing Helga to take the lead, but now he turned to Mia as they settled into his car. "What did you think?" he asked, his expression neutral but watchful. Mia considered her answer carefully. "It felt like coming home to a place I've never been before." The words sounded strange even to her own ears, but they were true. Oscar nodded, satisfaction evident in his eyes. "That's how it is when you find your calling. The recognition happens at a level deeper than thought." As they drove back to his penthouse, Mia gathered her courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind all day. "Mr. Nash, why are you doing all this for me?" The car slowed for a red light, and Oscar's face was illuminated in flashes of neon from the storefronts they passed. For a long moment, he didn't answer, and Mia feared she had overstepped. "I told you before that I see something of myself in you," he finally said, his voice softer than she'd heard it before. "What I didn't tell you is that I once was in a position very similar to yours. My mother was ill. We had no money, and I had a gift that no one recognized except one person, a teacher, who changed the course of my life." The light turned green, and the car moved forward again. "Her name was Mrs. Abrams. She taught art at my school in the South Side. She saw my sketches, architectural drawings mostly, buildings I imagined but had no way to build. She introduced me to her brother, who was a contractor. He gave me a job as a messenger, which let me learn the business from the ground up." Oscar's gaze remained fixed on the road ahead, but Mia could hear the emotion in his voice. "Mrs. Abrams died before she could see what came of her kindness. I've always regretted that I couldn't thank her properly." He glanced at Mia. "Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give is to recognize potential in others and help them access opportunities to develop it." They rode in silence for a while, the implications of his words settling over Mia like a mantle of responsibility. Finally, she spoke. "I won't let you down." Oscar smiled, a genuine warmth replacing his usual reserve. "I know you won't." The next weeks established a new rhythm to Mia's life. Mornings were spent at school, where her teachers had been informed of her changed circumstances, and suddenly seemed to pay more attention to her academic progress. Afternoons found her at the Bellamy and Chase workshop, where Helga Brandt introduced her to the fundamentals of jewelry making with a stern patience. That reminded Mia of her mother at her best. Weekends were divided between hospital visits to Claire, whose health improved steadily under proper medical care, and quiet hours at Oscar's penthouse, where Mia sketched endlessly, her designs evolving as her technical knowledge expanded. Oscar himself was often absent, his business interests requiring frequent travel, but when present, he took genuine interest in Mia's progress. He never directed her creativity, but offered observations that invariably pushed her to refine her thinking. "The true mark of design genius," he told her one evening as they ate dinner overlooking the twinkling cityscape, "is the balance between innovation and functionality. Beauty that serves no purpose is merely decoration. Purpose without beauty is just utility. The sweet spot lies between them." Mia absorbed this wisdom like a sponge, applying it not just to her designs, but to her understanding of the world. She began to see Oscar's kindness not as charity, but as a form of design, a deliberate intervention that created beauty from difficulty, purpose from potential. 1 month after her mother's hospitalization, Mia arrived at the workshop to find Helga in an unusually animated state. "Today is important day," the German woman announced, her accent thickening with excitement. "Today, you make your first piece for someone else." She led Mia to a workbench where materials had been laid out, silver wire, small tools, and a selection of blue stones that ranged from pale aquamarine to deep sapphire. "What am I making?" Mia asked, running her fingers lightly over the materials. "A bracelet," Helga replied, "for your mother. She comes home next week, yes? You should have gift for her." Mia's heart swelled at the thought. Claire had indeed been released from the hospital to a rehabilitation center, where she was regaining strength daily. The doctors spoke optimistically about her returning to independent living soon, though in a new apartment Oscar had arranged in a building with an elevator and proper heating. "What should it look like?" Mia asked, already envisioning possibilities. Helga tapped Mia's forehead gently. "That is for you to decide. But remember what Oscar always says about purpose and beauty. This is not just decoration. This is story. You are telling." Left alone with her thoughts and materials, Mia closed her eyes and thought of her mother, her strength, her sacrifice, her unwavering love despite circumstances that would have broken a lesser person. The design came to her fully formed, a delicate chain of silver circles, each linked to represent the continuity of their bond, with 3 stones set at intervals, a small pale blue stone for the past, a medium azure for the present, and a deep sapphire for the future. Not just beautiful, but meaningful. When Helga returned hours later to check her progress, the older woman stood silently for a long moment, observing the nearly completed piece. Then, in a gesture that startled Mia with its tenderness, she placed a work-roughened hand on Mia's shoulder. "This," she said simply, "is why Oscar believes in you." The day Claire was released from rehabilitation was crisp and bright, Chicago's fickle spring weather offering a rare, perfect afternoon. Oscar insisted on driving Mia himself to collect her mother, the back seat of his car filled with flowers, and a small suitcase of new clothes he had helped Mia select for Claire. "Are you nervous?" he asked as they approached the facility. Mia nodded, fidgeting with the small gift box that contained the bracelet. "What if she doesn't want to accept everything you've done for us? She's proud, you know." Oscar considered this. Pride is valuable when it preserves dignity, but sometimes accepting help with grace requires even greater strength. He glanced at Mia. "Your mother seems like a woman who understands the difference." Claire was waiting in the lobby, transformed from the frail woman who had entered the hospital months ago. Though still slender, she stood straight, her complexion healthy, her eyes clear and bright. She wore the sapphire necklace that had started this incredible journey, its blue fire complementing the simple dress provided by the rehabilitation center. When she saw Mia, her face lit with joy, and they embraced as if years, rather than weeks, had separated them. Over her mother's shoulder, Mia caught Oscar hanging back, allowing them this private moment. "Mom," she said, stepping back to present the small box. "I made this for you." Claire opened it carefully, gasping at the bracelet nestled on velvet inside. "Oh, Mia," she whispered, lifting it to examine the craftsmanship. You made this? It's exquisite. Helga helped, Mia admitted. But the design is mine. See? The little stone is the past, when things were hard but we had each other. The middle one is now, a time of healing and new beginnings, and the dark blue one is the future, whatever comes next for us. Claire's eyes filled with tears as she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, where it caught the light from the large windows. It's perfect, she said, then looked past Mia to where Oscar waited. Mr. Nash, I believe I owe you more gratitude than I could express in a lifetime. Oscar stepped forward, his usual commanding presence softened by genuine respect. Mrs. Peterson, your daughter has been a revelation. Any debt you imagine is more than paid by the privilege of watching her talent unfold. On the drive to their new apartment, Claire listened as Mia excitedly detailed everything she had learned, the progress she had made, and the designs she hoped to create next. Oscar contributed occasionally, his pride in Mia's accomplishments evident without being possessive. The new apartment, while modest by Oscar's standards, felt palatial compared to their former home, bright, warm, with windows that overlooked a small park rather than a brick wall. As Claire explored the space, exclaiming over thoughtful touches like bookshelves filled with volumes she had mentioned loving, and a kitchen stocked with her favorite foods, Oscar drew Mia aside. There's something we need to discuss, he said, his tone suddenly serious. I had intended to wait, but I believe the timing is right. Mia's stomach tightened with apprehension. Was this the moment when the cost of his generosity would be revealed? Bellamy and Chase sponsors a design competition each year for emerging talent, he continued. The winner receives a scholarship to the Fashion Institute and an apprenticeship with our design team. He paused, watching her carefully. I'd like you to enter. Relief flooded through Mia, followed quickly by doubt. But I'm only 10. The other contestants would be much older with real training. Age is irrelevant, Oscar said firmly. Talent and vision matter. Helga and I both believe you have what it takes to compete, more than compete, to win. The idea was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. What would I need to do? Create a collection. 5 pieces that tell a cohesive story. You have 2 months before the deadline. He smiled at her hesitation. Think about it. Talk to your mother. This is your decision, Mia. But remember what I told you when we first met. Talent shouldn't be limited by circumstance. Later that night, after Oscar had left and they had settled into their new home, Mia sat with her mother on their comfortable couch, the city lights twinkling beyond their windows. He wants me to enter a design competition, Mia said, explaining the details. What do you think? Claire was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently tracing the links of her new bracelet. I think, she finally said, that life has offered you an extraordinary opportunity, and it would be a mistake to refuse it out of fear or false modesty. Mia curled against her mother's side, inhaling the familiar scent that meant home and safety. Would you be disappointed if I wanted to be a designer instead of going to college? Claire laughed softly. Sweetheart, you're 10. You can be a designer and go to college. You can be anything you want. That's what I've always wanted for you. She tilted Mia's face up to meet her eyes. But whatever you choose, make sure it's your dream, not someone else's vision for you. Something about her mother's words sparked a realization in Mia. I think I want to enter the competition, not for Mr. Nash or even for us, but because creating beauty feels like what I was born to do. Claire's smile was radiant with pride. Then that's your answer. As they sat together in comfortable silence, Mia's mind already racing with ideas for her collection, a strange thought occurred to her. In the fairy tales she had loved as a younger child, magic happened to transform the heroine's life. But in her story, the magic had been there all along. In her own hands, her own vision, waiting for the moment when circumstance and opportunity aligned to set it free. Wait until you discover how Mia's extraordinary journey takes an unexpected turn as she prepares for the competition that could change everything. The next morning dawned grey and misty, the Chicago skyline barely visible through the low-hanging clouds. Mia woke early, her mind still buzzing with ideas for the competition. she slipped quietly from her new bedroom, a room of her very own with a desk positioned to catch the best light for drawing, and found her mother already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "I didn't expect you up so soon," Claire said, smiling as Mia helped herself to orange juice from a carton in the refrigerator, a small luxury they had rarely afforded before. "Couldn't sleep," Mia admitted. "I keep thinking about the competition." Claire set a plate of toast and eggs before her daughter. "Tell me what you're considering." As they ate, Mia described her vision, a collection inspired by transformation, each piece representing a different stage of metamorphosis. "Like a butterfly," she explained, gesturing with her fork. "But not literal butterflies. That would be too obvious. I want to show how change happens in subtle stages, almost invisible until suddenly everything is different." Claire listened thoughtfully, pride evident in her eyes. "That's beautiful, Mia, and very fitting." After breakfast, while Claire rested, still building her strength after her illness, Mia sketched preliminary designs at her desk. The ideas flowed easily, each piece connected to the others in theme, but distinct in execution. By midday, she had rough concepts for all 5 pieces of her collection. That afternoon, as arranged, Oscar's driver took Mia to the workshop at Bellamy and Chase. She entered with a new confidence, her sketchbook clutched to her chest like a shield. Helga looked up from her workbench, reading Mia's expression instantly. "So, you have decided to compete?" Mia nodded. "I have ideas already. May I show you?" For the next hour, Helga studied Mia's sketches, occasionally grunting with approval or asking sharp questions that forced Mia to refine her thinking. Finally, the older woman sat back, removing her glasses to rub the bridge of her nose. "This is ambitious," she said, tapping the page that showed Mia's most complex design. "Maybe too ambitious for your current skills." Mia's heart sank, but Helga wasn't finished. "However," she continued, "ambition is good quality in artist. We will work hard, yes? Every day. You will learn what you need to make these real." The intensity of the training that followed surpassed anything Mia had experienced. Helga was demanding but never cruel, pushing Mia to master techniques that usually took years to learn. The afternoons stretched into evenings as Mia bent over her workbench, fingers blistered and eyes strained, determined to translate the visions in her mind into physical reality. Oscar checked on her progress weekly, offering encouragement without pressure. "Remember," he told her during one visit, "the judges will be looking not just at technical execution, but at originality of concept. Your youth gives you an advantage there. You see with fresh eyes." At home, Claire supported Mia's dedication while ensuring she didn't neglect her schoolwork or health. "Genius needs balance," she would say, when Mia protested being called to dinner or reminded about bedtime. Even Mozart had to sleep. As April turned to May and May to June, Mia's collection took shape. 5 pieces that together told a story of emergence and becoming. The craftsmanship improved with each creation, her hands growing more confident, her understanding of materials more intuitive. The first piece was a simple silver band, etched with a pattern that appeared random, but actually represented the beginning of a complex fractal, potential waiting to unfold. The second, a pendant where gold and silver intertwined in a dance, of opposition and harmony, tension creating beauty. The third, a pair of earrings with stones that caught light differently depending on the angle, perception changing reality. The fourth, a brooch whose intricate design revealed hidden depths when examined closely, complexity emerging from simplicity. And finally, the centerpiece, a necklace whose elements echoed the previous 4 designs while transforming them into something entirely new, culmination and transcendence. 2 weeks before the competition deadline, Mia completed the final piece. Helga inspected it with uncharacteristic silence, turning it over in her hands, testing clasps and settings with meticulous attention. At last, she set it down and looked at Mia with an expression the girl had never seen before, something between pride and awe. "It is ready," Helga declared. "You are ready." The following day, as Mia prepared to take her collection to be photographed for the competition submission, An unexpected visitor arrived at the workshop. Valerie Harlow, the manager who had humiliated her months ago. Mia froze at the sight of her, the memory of shame rushing back with startling intensity. Valerie looked different, subdued, her previous arrogance replaced by a wary formality. She nodded briefly to Helga before approaching Mia's workbench. "Ms. Peterson," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "Mr. Nash asked me to deliver these personally." She placed a small package on the bench, careful not to disturb Mia's tools or materials. Mia eyed the package suspiciously. "What is it?" "Display stands for your collection," Valerie replied. "Custom-made to complement each piece." There was an awkward silence as both of them remembered their first encounter. Mia expected Valerie to leave immediately, but instead the woman hesitated, then spoke again, her voice lower. "I owe you an apology," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "My behavior when you first came to the store was inexcusable. I judged you based on appearance, and I was wrong." She straightened professional mask back in place. "I've learned from my mistake. I hope you can accept my apology." Mia studied the woman before her, seeing not the intimidating figure from her memory but someone flawed and human. "I accept," she said simply. Something like relief flickered across Valerie's face before she nodded once and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "Your collection is extraordinary. Everyone's talking about it." After Valerie left, Helga approached, eyebrows raised. "That woman has been humbled, I think." "What happened to her?" Mia asked, curious despite herself. "Mr. Nash mentioned she was demoted." Helga snorted. "Demoted, yes, from manager to sales associate, nearly fired, but Oscar gave her chance to learn better way." She glanced at the door where Valerie had exited. "She works hard now, less proud. Maybe someday she makes good manager after all." The encounter left Mia thoughtful as she carefully packed her collection for transportation. There was a certain symmetry to the situation. Valerie's fall from grace paralleling Mia's rise, both of them transformed by the events set in motion that snowy day in December. The night before the competition results were to be announced, Mia could hardly sleep. The judging had been completed days earlier, the 5 finalists notified, Mia among them, the youngest by nearly a decade. Tomorrow, at a gala event at Bellamy and Chase, the winner would be revealed. Claire found her daughter sitting by the window at midnight, sketching by moonlight. "Nervous?" she asked, sitting beside Mia on the window seat. Mia nodded. "What if I win? What if I don't? Everything will change either way." Claire wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Change is already happening, sweetheart. That's what your collection is about, isn't it? The beauty of becoming." Mia leaned into her mother's embrace, finding comfort in her steady presence. "I just want to make you proud." "Oh, Mia," Claire whispered, pressing a kiss to her daughter's hair. "You already have, every day in ways that have nothing to do with jewelry or competitions." As they sat together watching the city lights, Mia realized that regardless of tomorrow's outcome, she had already won something far more valuable than any prize, the chance to discover who she was meant to be, and the courage to become that person without apology. Morning would bring its own revelations. But for now, in this quiet moment with her mother, Mia found herself perfectly balanced between past and future, grateful for both the struggles that had shaped her and the possibilities that awaited. The grand ballroom of the Chicago Arts Center glittered with light reflected from crystal chandeliers and the jewelry adorning the city's elite. Display cases arranged around the perimeter showcased the 5 finalists' collections, each illuminated, to emphasize their unique qualities. Mia stood beside her display, heart pounding beneath the new dress Oscar had insisted on purchasing for the occasion, a simple design in deep blue that made her feel both elegant and true to herself. Claire, radiant in a silver gown that complemented the bracelet Mia had made her, stood nearby, chatting with Oscar and Helga. The 3 adults who had transformed Mia's life formed a protective triangle around her, their presence giving her strength as curious attendees examined her work and whispered about the child prodigy. "Nervous?" Oscar asked, approaching with 2 flutes of sparkling cider. Mia accepted one gratefully. "Terrified," she admitted. "The other finalists are so accomplished." Accomplishment comes in many forms, Oscar replied. Some take decades to develop their craft. Others, like you, arrive with an innate understanding that cannot be taught. He nodded toward her collection. Your work speaks for itself. Before Mia could respond, a hush fell over the crowd as the master of ceremonies approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 25th Annual Bellamy and Chase Emerging Designer Competition. The speech that followed seemed to last an eternity, though in reality it was only minutes. Mia barely heard the words. Her focus narrowed to the steady beating of her heart and the reassuring pressure of her mother's hand on her shoulder. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the announcer continued. This year's recipient of the Bellamy and Chase Scholarship and Apprenticeship, selected unanimously by our distinguished panel of judges, is, the pause stretched into infinity, Mia Peterson for her collection Metamorphosis. The applause hit Mia like a physical wave, momentarily stunning her. She felt her mother's hand tighten on her shoulder, heard Helga's characteristic ha of triumph, saw Oscar's smile of quiet satisfaction. Then she was moving toward the podium, her legs carrying her forward, while her mind still struggled to process the reality of the moment. As she accepted the Crystal Award, the lights seemed overwhelmingly bright, the faces before her a sea of indistinct features. The microphone loomed, expecting words she hadn't prepared. Taking a deep breath, Mia spoke from her heart. Thank you for this honor. 6 months ago, I stood outside Bellamy and Chase in the snow, holding all the money I had in the world, hoping to buy a small gift for my mother. I was told I didn't belong. She paused, finding Valerie in the crowd, offering a small smile to soften the words. Sometimes, rejection leads us to exactly where we're meant to be. She glanced at her mother, drawing strength from Claire's proud tears. My collection is about transformation. How we change, sometimes painfully, sometimes beautifully, but always inevitably. I want to thank the people who helped me through my own metamorphosis. My mother, who taught me dignity in difficult circumstances. Helga Brandt, who showed me how to translate vision into reality. And Oscar Nash, who saw possibility where others saw only poverty. The applause that followed her speech was deafening, but Mia hardly noticed. She was looking at Oscar, whose expression had shifted from pride to something more complex, a recognition that went beyond mentor and protégé. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Oscar drew Mia aside to a quiet corner of the ballroom. There's something I need to tell you, he said, his usual confidence replaced by an uncharacteristic hesitation. Something I should have told you from the beginning. Mia waited, curious but unafraid. Whatever it was, she trusted him enough now to know his intentions were good. The day you came into the store, he began, I recognized your designs immediately. Not the physical pieces, I had never seen those before, but the style, the perspective, the mathematical precision behind the beauty. He took a deep breath. They reminded me of someone I lost long ago, my daughter Lily. The revelation struck Mia like a physical blow. Your daughter? Oscar nodded, his eyes distant with memory. She had a gift similar to yours. She would have been about your age now if... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I'm so sorry, Mia whispered, understanding now the sadness she had sometimes glimpsed behind his kindness. Don't be, Oscar said gently. Helping you has brought meaning to my loss in ways I never expected. I want you to know that while I may have been initially drawn to you because you reminded me of her, I stayed because of who you are. Uniquely, brilliantly yourself. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. This belongs to you, now. It would have been Lily's, but I think she would approve of its new owner. Inside the box lay a delicate gold key on a fine chain. What does it open? Mia asked, lifting it carefully. Oscar smiled. The future. It's the key to the private design studio at Bellamy and Chase. As our newest apprentice, you'll need access at all hours. Inspiration rarely follows a convenient schedule. As Mia slipped the chain around her neck, the weight of the key against her heart felt right. Not a burden, but a promise. This was not an ending, but a beginning. another stage in her ongoing metamorphosis. Across the room she caught her mother's eye, and they shared a smile of perfect understanding. They had survived the hardest times together, and now they would embrace the better days ahead, days filled with creation, growth, and the quiet joy of becoming exactly who they were meant to be. Have you ever witnessed someone transform their life through talent and determination? How did their journey inspire you? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Summer arrived in Chicago with a vengeance, the humidity wrapping the city in a thick blanket of heat that seemed to slow everything except Mia's racing mind. Her apprenticeship at Bellamy and Chase had officially begun, bringing with it a schedule that would have exhausted most adults, let alone a 10-year-old girl. Mornings were devoted to her education. Oscar had arranged for a private tutor to ensure Mia's academic development kept pace with her artistic growth. Afternoons found her in the workshop under Helga's exacting guidance, learning the increasingly complex techniques her evolving designs demanded. Evenings were spent in the private studio, where she was free to experiment without constraints, translating the visions in her mind into sketches and prototypes that often kept her working until Claire gently insisted on bedtime. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Claire observed one night as Mia struggled to keep her eyes open over dinner. "Even geniuses need rest." "I'm not a genius," Mia protested, the word making her uncomfortable. "I just see things differently." Claire smiled. "That, my dear, is often the definition of genius." Despite the demanding schedule, Mia thrived under the combination of structure and creative freedom. Her designs grew more sophisticated, incorporating techniques she had only recently mastered alongside innovations of her own devising. Helga, never generous with praise, began to treat Mia more as a colleague than a student, seeking her opinion on projects and occasionally implementing her suggestions. Oscar, for his part, maintained a careful balance, present enough to offer guidance when needed, absent enough to allow Mia to develop her own artistic voice without the shadow of his influence. After revealing the truth about his daughter, a new ease had developed between them, the unspoken question of his motives no longer hanging between them. One particularly sweltering afternoon in late July, Mia was working alone in the private studio when a knock interrupted her concentration. She opened the door to find Valerie Harlow standing there, a portfolio clutched in her hands. "Ms. Peterson," Valerie said, formal but not cold. "I apologize for disturbing you, but Mr. Nash asked me to deliver these reference materials for your next project." Mia stepped back to allow her entry, curious about this new development. Since the competition, her interactions with Valerie had been minimal and strictly professional, a mutual agreement to acknowledge the past without dwelling on it. As Valerie set the portfolio on a workbench, she hesitated, glancing around the studio with an expression Mia couldn't quite read. "Your new designs are causing quite a stir," she said finally. "The marketing department can hardly keep up with the demand for your competition pieces." Mia looked up in surprise. "They're selling my designs?" "Limited editions, yes." Valerie seemed equally surprised by Mia's reaction. "Didn't Mr. Nash tell you? Your Metamorphosis collection has been the most successful launch in Bellamy and Chase history." The news was both thrilling and unsettling. Mia had been so focused on the creative process that she had given little thought to the commercial implications of her work. "I didn't know," she admitted. Valerie's expression softened slightly. "Well, you should. People are connecting with your work in a remarkable way." She paused, then added, "myself included." Before Mia could respond to this unexpected admission, Valerie continued briskly. "The materials include market analysis and customer feedback. Mr. Nash thought you might find it useful for understanding how different elements resonate with various demographics." As Valerie turned to leave, Mia made a spontaneous decision. "Would you like to see what I'm working on now?" The question clearly surprised Valerie, but after a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "I would, yes." Mia led her to the drafting table, where her latest designs were spread out, a collection inspired by urban architecture, translating the geometric patterns of Chicago's skyline into wearable art. Valerie studied them with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about Mia's inspiration and technical approach. As they talked, The formality between them gradually dissolved, replaced by a shared appreciation for design that transcended their complicated history. "You have a gift for making complex ideas accessible," Valerie observed as she prepared to leave. "These pieces are sophisticated but not intimidating, that's rare." The compliment, coming from someone who had once dismissed her entirely, carried a weight that Mia hadn't expected. "Thank you," she said simply. After Valerie left, Mia opened the portfolio to find not only market data, but financial reports, detailing the profit margins on her designs. The figures made her breath catch. Her work had generated more revenue in 3 months than most designers achieved in years. That evening, when Oscar visited the studio to check her progress, Mia confronted him with the information. "Why didn't you tell me my designs were being sold?" she asked, trying to keep accusation from her voice. Oscar regarded her calmly. "Because I wanted you to create without the pressure of commercial expectations. Art becomes something different when the market enters the equation." "But I should have known," Mia insisted. "It's my work." "You're right," Oscar acknowledged, surprising her with his ready agreement. "I should have discussed it with you and your mother. My intention was to protect your creative process, but I overstepped." His willingness to admit a mistake only increased Mia's respect for him. "What happens to the money?" she asked, the practical question that had been forming in her mind. "It's being held in trust for you," Oscar explained, "to be accessed when you turn 18, or earlier if needed, for educational purposes. Your mother and I are co-trustees." The information was simultaneously reassuring and overwhelming. At 10 years old, Mia had apparently secured her financial future, a concept almost too abstract to grasp. Oscar seemed to read her thoughts. "This changes nothing about your day-to-day life," he said gently. "Financial security is a tool, not a destination. The real wealth is here." He tapped her sketchbook. "Keep focusing on that." As summer gave way to fall and fall to winter, Mia's name began to appear in design magazines and industry publications. The child prodigy of Chicago became a minor celebrity in fashion circles, though Oscar and Claire worked together to shield her from excessive attention. Interviews were limited and carefully supervised, photograph requests politely declined, personal appearances restricted to select industry events. "Your work should speak for itself," Claire insisted, when Mia expressed curiosity about the growing interest in her story. "Fame is fleeting and often destructive. Craft endures." By the time snow again blanketed Chicago's streets, marking a full year since the day Mia had first entered Bellamy and Chase, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Her mother was healthy, their financial worries eliminated, her talent recognized and nurtured. Yet something restless stirred beneath the surface of her contentment, a question about what came next, about the direction of a journey that had barely begun. The answer arrived unexpectedly on a quiet Sunday afternoon as Mia and Claire visited the Art Institute, a monthly ritual they had established as a source of fresh inspiration. As they wandered through the modern wing, Mia found herself drawn to an installation she had never noticed before, a collection of intricately crafted metal sculptures that seemed to capture motion in static form. "Beautiful, aren't they?" came a voice at her elbow. Mia turned to find a woman in her 30s, with bright red hair and paint-spattered jeans, studying her with interest. "I'm Natalie Byrne, the artist," the woman continued, extending a hand, "and judging by your expression, you understand what I was trying to do here." Mia shook the offered hand, slightly starstruck. She recognized the name. Natalie Byrne was an acclaimed sculptor, whose work bridged the gap between fine art and functional design. "Mia Peterson," she replied. "I was just thinking that your pieces remind me of music made visible, like you've captured sound waves in metal." Natalie's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's exactly what inspired the series. Most people don't see it." She tilted her head, studying Mia more carefully. "Wait, Peterson? Are you the jewelry designer everyone's talking about?" Before Mia could respond, Claire appeared at her side, her protective instincts engaged by the conversation with a stranger. "This is my mother, Claire Peterson," Mia said quickly. "Mum, this is Natalie Byrne." She made these sculptures. Recognition flickered in Claire's eyes as she shook Natalie's hand. Your work is extraordinary. We've admired your installations before. The chance encounter evolved into an impromptu tour of the exhibition, with Natalie explaining her creative process and the technical challenges of working with metal on a large scale. As they talked, Mia found herself asking questions that had been forming in her mind for months. Questions about the boundaries between commercial and fine art, about creative independence, about the responsibility that came with recognition. You know, Natalie said as they prepared to part ways, I teach a master class at the School of the Art Institute during summer sessions. Usually it's for college students, but exceptions can be made for exceptional talent. She handed Mia a business card. Think about it. Your jewelry is beautiful, but I suspect your vision might extend beyond what can be worn. That evening, as Mia related the conversation to Oscar over dinner at his penthouse, she watched his face carefully, uncertain how he would react to the idea of her exploring artistic avenues beyond Bellamy and Chase. To her surprise, he smiled. Natalie Byrne is brilliant, difficult and opinionated, but brilliant. You could learn a great deal from her. You wouldn't mind if I took her class? Mia asked, relief evident in her voice. Oscar set down his fork, regarding her seriously. Mia, my goal has never been to limit you to jewelry design. That happens to be where your talent first manifested, and where I could offer specific guidance. But true creativity recognizes no boundaries. He paused. I would support any direction your artistic journey takes, as long as it comes from genuine passion rather than fleeting interest. The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship, an acknowledgement that Mia was growing not just as an artist, but as a person with autonomy and evolving interests. It also planted a seed in her mind about the possibility of expanding her creative horizons beyond what she had previously considered. Spring brought new opportunities as word of Mia's talent spread beyond Chicago. Offers came from design houses in New York, Paris, and Milan. Apprenticeships, collaborations, exclusive contracts. Oscar and Claire fielded these proposals together, creating a unified front that prioritized Mia's education and well-being over commercial advantage. She's 11 years old, Claire would remind particularly persistent suitors. Her development as a person comes before her development as a brand. In May, as Mia was preparing for Natalie Byrne's summer masterclass, an unexpected visitor arrived. At the Bellamy and Chase workshop, a tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked black hair and piercing dark eyes that immediately reminded Mia of Oscar. You must be Mia, the woman said, her voice carrying the faint trace of an accent Mia couldn't place. I'm Eliza Nash, Oscar's sister. The revelation was startling. In all their months of acquaintance, Oscar had never mentioned having a sister. Helga, working nearby, greeted Eliza with obvious familiarity, suggesting this wasn't a surprise to everyone. Oscar's in London until Wednesday, Helga informed her. Eliza nodded. I know. I came to meet Mia. She smiled at the girl's confused expression. My brother speaks of you often in his letters. I felt it was time we were introduced. At Eliza's suggestion, they moved to the small cafe adjacent to the store. As they settled with tea and pastries, Mia studied this unexpected connection to Oscar's life, noting similarities in their bearing and the thoughtful way they chose their words. Oscar tells me you're expanding your artistic horizons this summer, Eliza said. Sculpture with Natalie Byrne. Mia nodded. I want to try working on a larger scale, with different materials. A natural progression, Eliza agreed. When Oscar was your age, he moved from architectural drawings to three-dimensional models. His room was filled with miniature buildings constructed from whatever materials he could find. The glimpse into Oscar's childhood was fascinating. He doesn't talk much about when he was young, Mia observed. Something like sadness flickered across Eliza's face. Those years were difficult for us. Our mother was ill for a long time before she died. Oscar took on tremendous responsibility at a very young age. She stirred her tea absently. In many ways, I think he sees in you the child he never got to be, free to explore talent without the burden of survival. The conversation shifted to Eliza's own life, her work as a curator at museums across Europe, her current project documenting indigenous art forms threatened by globalization. She asked thoughtful questions about Mia's designs, offering perspectives that connected jewelry making to broader artistic and cultural traditions. As they prepared to leave, Eliza placed a hand on Mia's shoulder. Oscar has always sought to create beauty from difficult circumstances. It's how he survived his own losses. In helping you, he's honoring not just Lily's memory, but our mother's as well, she smiled. Thank you for allowing him that healing. The meeting with Eliza added another dimension to Mia's understanding of Oscar, contextualizing his generosity within a personal history marked by both hardship and resilience. It also reinforced her growing awareness that her own story was becoming intertwined with a larger narrative, one of legacy, continuity, and the responsibility that came with opportunity. Summer arrived, bringing with it Natalie Burns' masterclass and a new creative challenge. Working with metal on a grand scale required different skills, different tools, and a different mindset. For the first time since meeting Helga, Mia found herself struggling to translate her vision into physical form. Good, Natalie declared when Mia expressed frustration after a particularly difficult session. Comfort is the enemy of growth. If it were easy, you wouldn't be learning anything new. The class pushed Mia beyond her technical and conceptual boundaries. Natalie's teaching style was demanding, but never discouraging, challenging her students to question their assumptions about materials, process, and purpose. Under her guidance, Mia began to see connections between the intimate scale of jewelry and the monumental presence of sculpture, both ways of defining space, creating relationships, telling stories through form. For her final project, Mia created a series of interconnected metal forms that could be arranged in multiple configurations, a physical metaphor for the evolving relationships that had shaped her life. The largest piece, a graceful curve of hammered copper, supported smaller elements representing her mother, Oscar, Helga, and notably Valerie, acknowledgement that even difficult encounters contributed to growth. When the installation was complete, Claire and Oscar attended the class exhibition together, their pride evident as Mia explained her concept to visitors. Watching them, her mother who had sacrificed everything for her welfare, and the man who had recognized her potential, when no one else could, Mia felt a profound gratitude that transcended her artistic accomplishment. Later that evening, as they celebrated with dinner at their favorite restaurant, Oscar raised his glass in a toast. To Mia Peterson, no longer a prodigy, but an artist coming into her own. Claire smiled, adding her own glass to the toast. And to the village that helps her grow. Mia looked between them, these two people who had become partners in guiding her development despite their different backgrounds and perspectives. To transformation, she offered, and to the courage to become. As summer faded into autumn, bringing with it new projects, new challenges, and new opportunities, Mia carried that moment with her, a perfect balance point between what had been and what might be, between gratitude for the past and hope for the future. The girl who had once stood alone in the cold, clutching her meager savings and dreaming of buying a simple gift, had herself become a gift, to her mother, to Oscar, and to a world hungry for beauty born of authentic vision. More importantly, she had discovered the most precious gift of all, the freedom to define herself, not by circumstances or limitations, but by the boundless potential of her own imagination. For in the end, the true pattern prodigy was not just the designs she created, but the life she was creating, intricate, meaningful, and uniquely her own. Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.